Hello. Hi, abundant women. How are you? Okay, I'm just going to wait for people to show up. Not sure if I should start the class because this is a whole new group. Usually, if it was the Money Magic group or any of my other groups, I'd be talking a mile a minute at this point. So, if you've just joined, say hi, hello. Um, Okay, so hi, my name is Vangile Makwakwa, and I am the founder of Wealthy Money. I teach women to heal ancestral money. Well, I help women heal ancestral money trauma so that they can fall in love with their bank accounts and live their best lives. Hi, Malevo. Hi, Portia. Yeah, so I've been asked to be part of this incredible summit. I didn't really get to, uh, I didn't actually have many doubts. As soon as I was asked, I was like, oh, okay, this sounds really cool. I'm just going to go with it. Nomasonto, you say hi. Hi, Nomasonto. Okay, so today I actually want to talk about the interplay between collective trauma and individual trauma and how it triggers us, right? So, for most of us, I think yesterday, for the first time, so yesterday I thought, oh, I should preface this by saying that I live in Sri Lanka. So I've been a nomad and a traveler for all my adult life. So as soon as I graduated from UCT, I started traveling and living in various countries. And I moved back to South Africa when I was $60,000 in debt. I found myself in debt in Boston. I just done my MBA. I'd launched a company, gotten into a relationship, and everything fell apart. From I thought, oh well, doing an MBA and becoming a finance graduate would actually lead me to making more money. I thought that it was all about the money stuff, that it was all about the practical stuff. Oh, okay. Hey guys, sorry. Yeah, so I'm losing track. Okay, so I thought it was all about the practical stuff, right? So if you join, just keep saying hi. If you have questions, ask questions, right? So I thought it was all about money stuff. And for me, what happened was I finished my MBA and I was like, well, great. And then I went and I did a certificate in entrepreneurship at the same business school, at the Simmons School of Management in Boston, Massachusetts, right? So I was like, oh, this is perfect. I've got a finance degree from UCT, finance honors degree, and I've got this master's. I can really now go and do the money stuff. And as soon as I graduated, I couldn't get out of bed. Anything to do with money would freak me out. The idea of getting a high paying job freaked me out. So I was like, so that's actually why I ended up doing the entrepreneurship certificate, because I was like, maybe it's not the job that, maybe it's the job that is the problem, which it was. I've since learned, now that I've done like 8 months in jobs, that I definitely have never been able to go beyond. Like, I've only held two proper jobs, and in both jobs I stayed maybe like 12 months. So I know that was also a personality problem, right? But what I didn't realize was that it's a money problem. So, I thought it was a money problem. It wasn't even a money problem, right? So let me just continue telling the story. And the weird thing is that I graduated during the last recession in 2008. So that was when we had a global recession as well. And now it looks like we're heading into another global recession. So, I felt like there were people that couldn't hire me, right? Because I was looking around at all my classmates and they were losing jobs. And a lot of them were literally, they just gotten hired and then they got fired, right? So I was panicked about that. And I was like, okay, I can take hold of my destiny because I fell into that whole like, the only way to survive this is to start a company, grab hold of your own destiny, blah, blah, blah. And I fell into that and I just really believed it, went, did my certificate in entrepreneurship, and then graduated. And so after that, I was like, okay, I'm starting a company. The day I started the company was also the day when I stopped being able to get out of bed. I was extremely, extremely depressed. Hi, hi, Numpumelelo. So I was extremely, extremely depressed. I mean, I just started this company. I remember going to Bank of America and you can register a company at the bank and starting there and getting my tax ID and everything. And I'm like, okay, now I'm in business. And then I get home and I'm just like, I can't do this, can't get out of bed. And I thought I was a failure. Then I couldn't pay rent and I was borrowing money from friends. Then I got the brilliant idea to start living off of credit cards because I was reading all these really famous entrepreneur stories about how they got credit cards and put and really believed that, oh, this is going to work. And they were just, or they were at the end of their theater and they put stuff on credit cards and went into debt and borrowed money from family and friends. And somehow, through sheer determination, they were able to make it. And I was like, that's going to be me. I've got determination. I've got resilience. I can do this. I'm going to do the same thing. Well, let's just fast forward and say, like, years later, like 4 years later, I was $60,000 in debt and definitely had not managed to do the same thing, right? So actually, 3 years later, I was $60,000 in debt, suicidal, really depressed, had no freaking clue what I was going to do with my life, and having panic attacks at the idea of going to withdraw money, and just having panic attacks at the idea of managing money. So for me, I always say that I feel like my turning point happened when I had to go to the bank, to the ATM, and I ended up sitting on the pavement. Not because I didn't have money. I had money, but I also had $60,000 in debt. So I had, I think, about $2,000 in the bank. And the crazy thing though was that I had a side gig that I was doing on top of running the company where I was making $2,000 a week for 10 hours of work. So I was actually looking back, I'm like, oh my God, I was literally doing really chilled work, 10 hours a week. I was working for the Saudi royal family, tutoring, and I had also other clients from wealthy families where I was tutoring and teaching economics and finance because, well, I understand the theory behind economics and finance, right? It's one thing to understand the theory and to understand how the markets work, and it's another to employ it in your own life. Knowledge actually doesn't lead to behavioral change. Knowledge doesn't lead to application. And I always tell people this, that having the knowledge of something doesn't mean that I'm going to apply it, because how many of us know that we should be eating salads and drinking water, not drinking lots of alcohol, and be exercising at least an hour 4 times a week? And how many of us actually do that? Not many, right? We know about it, we'll read things on it and be like, oh yeah, because knowledge, having being smart and having the knowledge is not the same as applying it and using it in your life. If you're intelligent and you have the knowledge and you read something and you grasp it, or you watch these videos and you grasp it and you're like, oh my God, that was great. It's just intellectual stimulation. I speak from experience, right? The way that you know that a shift has happened is that you are applying these processes in your own life. You are seeing a shift. And often that takes lots of deeper inner work than listening to videos and reading. But never mind, I didn't know that then. Let me go back to the story. So I'm on the side of the pavement, right? And in a place called, wait, what's this? it was the North End. Yeah, so I was in the North End in Boston, and I Haymarket. So I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, oh my God, this cannot be my life. I haven't even turned 30 yet, and already my life consists of me having panic attacks on the side of the pavement because I can't go and withdraw money from the bank, and because I can't look at my payslip. And so I'll tell you guys what happened after I worked with the trauma, right? And then I'll transition into what's happening now in terms of collective trauma and what I learned in that process. So there I am. And I just realized in that moment, I had this deep insight that things are not working. But obviously, again, having a deep insight doesn't mean that suddenly my life is going to change. I was just like, I just feel this deep shame. This is not working. And instead of me going like, oh my God, I'm going to go change my life, I start feeling like, oh my God, I'm such a complete failure. So many people have invested so much in me. I've been to these incredible schools. I've been to these top universities. My parents have had to give up quite a bit. I've had to give up quite a bit to be able to continue this education. And yet, I am not moving forward. So I thought that I was cursed or bewitched. And that literally was what I thought. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I was like, I'm sure someone has done something to me, cursed me, put something on me, or there's a family curse. So I became obsessed with the family curse. But luckily, a few months later, one of my friends told me about meditation and Vipassana, because I was saying to her, like, I feel like I'm being guided to sit still with my thoughts and just let everything go and be with my thoughts. And then she was like, yeah, that would be meditation going within. And I was like, how can I learn to do this? And she told me about Vipassana, and I went to Vipassana meditation. And that for me was just the beginning, right? The minute I went on there, I had to sit with my thoughts for hours on end. And what I saw was that, you know what? Little, you say, wow, your becoming is very inspiring. I can totally relate. I'm glad, right? So for me, then it took me on this journey because what I realized was that nothing was happening to me at the Vipassana Center. For 10 days, I was alone meditating. We took a vow. You also take a vow of silence. You don't talk to anyone for 10 days, not even to say hello, how are you? You don't do hand signs. You don't journal. You don't read. You don't do anything. So I was like, wow. So nobody is out here bothering me, like basically upsetting me in any way. There is nothing happening. My food is catered for. I get time to sleep, all these things, but I am still bothered. Like my natural state of being, even when my needs are being taken care of and I don't have to worry about anything, is one of me being in a constant state of worry, even when I'm not being asked to pay for anything in those 10 days. All I thought about in the first day of the first 10 days was my ex-boyfriend. So I was like, wow, my mind only dwells on these things, like my ex-boyfriend. And then the other one was 80% of the time money. And I was stressed about money, even though for 10 days I didn't have a reason to be. And that for me was the beginning of a deep realization that, it has nothing to do with the money. It's got nothing to do with money, that my issues are not about money, even though on the surface it looked like it, right? It looked like my issues were my $60,000 of debt. And it looked like because maybe I wasn't able to make as much money as I want. And then it hit me at that moment. I was like, wait a minute. I work like 40 hours a month and I make $8,000 a month. That's way more than most people make. So clearly the problem isn't about the amount of money that I'm making, right? And I hate money in my bank account. I'm scared by it. So the problem isn't that there's no money in my bank account. The problem is about something deeper, and it's got nothing to do with money. And so started this deep journey that I've been on for years around trauma and understanding the impacts of trauma and how it works with money, right? So what I started off with when I started my journey was looking at mindset around my thinking and around my emotional state around money. I quickly moved away from the positive thinking vibe thing, right? It doesn't work for me. I know for some people it works, but it's not my jam. I'm not that person that, like, my mind doesn't work like that. Like, I guess I'm one of those people that they call like a realistic pessimist or something. Maybe I am. Some people say that I'm a diehard optimist, right? But when it comes to feeding my mind like things that I know are not happening right now, I get very, like, it really stresses me out, and I've noticed that it adds more anxiety than ever before for me. And they've actually done studies that there are certain people like me for whom those positive statements don't work in the same way, right? So, and I say that was a blessing for me, right? Because what it meant was to say, okay, what the hell is going on? Why doesn't this work for me? What is on a deeper level for me, right? And so over time, I worked with my emotions and getting into an emotional state where I'm working with no longer feeling anxious around money, or working with my emotions around envy, etc. Then I published my book, Heart, Mind, and Money. And for me, what came up and what I realized after Heart, Mind, and Money was that I sat one day and I had like a random question, which is, why do I even feel the feelings that I feel? Like, it's not just random, right? So why am I feeling the emotions that I'm feeling? There must be a reason why I constantly react the way that I do in certain situations. And what happens if I go beyond those situations and go deeper and work on healing those situations? And that's when I started doing trauma work. And that's when I started doing deeper work around ancestral trauma and how trauma travels through bloodlines, and understanding that we are, which I already knew, right? Because Vipassana meditation, and before then I'd been doing a whole lot of spiritual quests. Before I even found Vipassana, I'd already dabbled in Hinduism. I tried so many different religions, so many different spiritual practices. I'd been a seeker most of my life. So for me, I realized that I knew, I didn't have to realize, I knew because I'd had past life experiences that we have a soul. And I started to research also, using myself mainly as a guinea pig, and then later my private clients, how trauma is also carried across lifetimes, right? So the soul is this huge, big thing. It's not just this lifetime. We can't minimize ourselves to this lifetime. I am the embodiment of everyone that came before me, my ancestors, and they didn't just pass down their looks to me, they passed down their ways of survival. Some of those ways of surviving were based off of trauma, actually most of them, right? Because research says that humans tend to learn from bad experiences a lot, right? But the interesting part of the research is that actually it's faster for us to rewire our brains. The fastest way to do that is through pleasure, right? So there's so many ways. So, and then also my soul is carrying this intense amount of knowledge, all our souls, and not just from this galaxy, from many galaxies and from many multiverses. And so I'm coming already as the soul that has experienced so much. And then I interact with the world. And every time I interact with the world, it reaffirms and triggers all that old stuff that my ancestors believed and their ways of behaving. It triggers my past life stuff, all that. And that then influences my present moment in this moment, right? So the way for me to remain present is to really heal, is to go to those lifetimes, is to work with those ancestral stories, ancestral vows, ancestral beliefs, and then I can start to make different decisions. And here's the crazy thing. When I say to people, like, I had no clue that I was earning $8,000 a month, people are like, how did you not know? Because I was panicked around money. Every time money came in, I was gifting it away, even though I was $60,000 in debt. As soon as money came in, it had to go out, and I was gifting it away to friends, to family. Mind you, I owed people money. The people that I owed money to, nope. I wasn't paying them back because I was busy gifting it away to get rid of the money as fast as possible. So it's possible to be completely clueless about our finances and to not see things and not even see opportunities, right? That's because of trauma. So for me, the first thing that happened was the minute I started working with my trauma and started healing it. And for me, a big thing was working with my big mother wound, because I always share how I couldn't move forward with my debt repayment because I had this vow of loyalty towards my family, a big vow. So the vows of loyalty are very layered. So I still have vows of loyalty, right? But now this was just another layer. This was the top layer, shall we put it? And my fear, it turned out, was that if I become financially stable, then I'm betraying my mother, who at that time was struggling financially or had actually struggled financially a lot in my teens. So how dare I want to be different? It would almost be like me showing her up, right? So can you see how already there was a family trauma that was influencing my behavior around money? My mom lost most of her money when I was in my teens. And so the teen version of me was like, oh wow, I love my mother. So I never want my mother to feel less than or feel like she is doing something bad because she could not achieve what I achieved financially. So the way that, and mind you, this could be with your mom, it could be with your husband. I see a lot of women do this with husbands and with lovers and boyfriends, right? Which is, oh no, I don't want to have more than them because it will make them feel less than. It may make them feel not enough of a man. So I'm not going to allow myself to grow financially or step into that financial version that is me because I don't want to make them feel bad. So for me, it was my mom, right? For you, it could be your sister, your brother, anyone, right? So this was just like one aspect. Like I said, trauma is layered. You have this soul that has experienced so much. It's not just going to be one size fits all and everything the same thing for everyone, right? So for me, this was my thing. So then that was my first like wow moment of wow. And I could then trace back and see how my mother always would sabotage when she reached a particular income level, right? And every time she grew to a particular income level, my grandmother, who was my favorite human in the world when she was alive, right? Um, she would always say to my mom and her kids and make sure that everybody is fair, that you should help this one is struggling, you should help so and so, you should help so and so. So I could see how my mother's self-sabotage and her inability to grow beyond a certain point was also directly linked to her mother, right? And I could tell with my grandmother, because I knew her issues with my great grandmother, that there was a link. And I was like, wow, this is just, well, not great, but this is one big ancestral story. We all have these vows of loyalties towards our mothers, and we're not even aware how they are impacting us. And most of them are based on trauma, right? So whichever mom and sister, whichever great 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 grandmother started that and then passed it on to all their kids, it's been something that's been ongoing, right? So for me, I started to realize that, oh my gosh, for me to be able to save money, I had to start to allow myself to see the money that I was earning. I had to release my vow of loyalty to my mom and her inability, and stop being loyal to her inability to grow her business beyond a certain point, right? And start running at the time my tutoring business, where I was like, I need to start running my tutoring business and shut down my failing business, right? And start running the tutoring business as a proper business so that I can see the money that I'm making. And this is how I started to see the money that I was actually making, right? And later on started to develop a relationship with my bank account and look at my bank account every day, et cetera, et cetera. But then there was the flip side, which is I couldn't figure out why the hell I wasn't paying off my debts. Okay, so the truth is that you can be loyal to your family and you can also rebel against your family. This universe is so vast, the soul doesn't do either or. It usually does and, right? So at the time, I was like, oh, okay, I've worked through my vows of loyalty, but then I was like, what the F? I see the money coming through my bank account, but now I can't seem to save it or pay off the debts. So now I have a new issue, because again, you heal one aspect of trauma and another aspect of trauma shows up. So then I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So then I started working on the vows. Then I realized that actually I had deep, deep vows of rebellion towards my mother. So if you like, I have a deep mother wound that I've worked on over the years, like really, really deep. My mom and I had like this really contentious relationship from the time I was born, basically, So it wasn't a shock to me that a huge part of me was like, I will never be like my mother. But get this, my mom may not have been, may have had an upper limit as to how far she grew in her business, but she and my dad are incredible savers. They don't spend a lot, right? And a lot of how my mom lost her money was by over giving, the black tax issue, giving everything. She literally gave her entire estate to my uncle. A long, long story, right? But that's literally what happened. And she would help everyone and give and give and give, right? Which again, on the surface, it looks like giving is the problem, but the giving is actually being triggered, giving to the point where we are denying ourselves and denying our kids is a trauma response, and it is being triggered by something else entirely. And I won't know what it is that triggers your giving. I can just make guesstimates, right? Until you go deeper into the work. But anyway, so I realized that I had this deep vow of rebellion towards my mother, but because I was holding on to this vow of rebellion, it meant that I was rebelling against everything that she also was, right? And one of the things that she was happened to be a saver and a person who didn't have debts. I've never seen my parents with big debts. I've never seen my parents spend or say, oh my gosh, I owe so and so. I really didn't grow up with that. My mom and my dad are not those people. Their issue is that they limit themselves in terms of how much income they make, right? But they are not wasteful people, and they spend really well according to their values. They don't deny themselves of things, but they're not like flashy people. So I was like, okay, where is my issue coming from? Where did I learn about credit cards? Well, because I'm in rebellion mode. So I had to work with the vow of rebellion. And once I allowed my inner child, that version of me that decided from a young age that she would never be like my mom, and unfortunately, when that vow was made, was also the time when my mom's businesses were thriving. So now you've got a vow of rebellion against the thriving and the lack of debt, and against the savings, and a vow of loyalty to upper limiting. So can you see, it's just a hot mess, right? And this is directly linked to my childhood trauma because of the way that my mother was and the way our relationship was. The trauma response and the way for my inner child to protect herself was to say, I will never be like that, right? So then there's this big vow of rebellion that goes into the Akashic plane and that my soul is now bound to honor. So when I started to clear and heal those vows, I was able to start paying back debt. Not only was I able to pay back debt, I shocked myself. I still have the screenshots of that, by the way. I literally created a weekly payment plan, debt repayment plan, and I figured out how to work with my weekly income to pay back debt, to grow the tutoring business, to keep doing to keep paying for coaches and online courses, because now I was like, oh my god, this stuff is working, let me do this work, right? And for me, all that kept reinforcing was that healing the trauma helps me then feel clearer, and gives me clarity as to the practical steps to take. Because if my soul is eternal and has experienced all sorts of things, then my soul also remembers the practical money stuff, right? My ancestors knew the practical money stuff. Hell, your child knows the practical money stuff. Ask an 8-year old what, like, they understand the basis of savings, right? But to do it is the issue. So I realized that the more I healed the trauma, the more I was able to do. And that's where for me, and I was very lucky. I had a coach, Joan Sebeza was my first coach. And when she was observing me do all this work on my own, she kept encouraging me to go and create. She was like, oh my God, like these shifts that you're having are incredible. What are you doing? I was like, I'm just following my intuition. I'm creating my own exercises, creating my own meditations. And she kept encouraging me to say, create these meditations and then eventually share them with people, right? Create these exercises. Because I was like, I would Google and I would try to find something that would help me, and it just wouldn't show up in the way that I was experiencing. Because also a lot of things were just layered. Because I'm like, but what do I do now about my grandmother and my great grandmother and the things that I'm realizing are coming up around them? What do I do with this? How do I heal it? So that is how I hope this kind of shows how individual trauma can impact financial behavior, but also how trauma is passed down from generation to generation, right? This is just a snippet, not even like going in depth. So let's talk about how collective trauma plays out in this pandemic. And what I wanted to say while I was sharing the story was that so that you guys can see that trauma is not this big thing, right? I share the story to show you guys that there is no murder, there is no blood, there is no anyone standing next to me throughout this, making me feel like kidnapping me. We usually think of trauma as this big event that is happening. But really, what trauma is an event that is too vast for us to process on a subconscious level or a soul level or a spiritual level. So it remains unprocessed within our psyche and also within our energy field. So then what happens, because it's an unprocessed event in the energy field, is in the background, it keeps playing in our subconscious mind. And so we keep attracting the same thing. And actually, for most people, they will say, oh, visualize it away, like really just do affirmations on it. But the thing is that if the trauma hasn't been fully processed, then it will still keep coming up. That's why we can easily manifest lots of money and then get rid of it. And then we're like, oh my God. And then we get into this need to constantly manifest money. And no matter how much money we manifest, we never see like anything tangible that we do with it, because the real issue is that there is a trauma around money or some other emotional trauma that somehow shows up in our finances. So it's not about the what we are manifesting is the event that we want to experience, but we haven't processed the trauma and released it from our energy space. Sorry, guys, if you're hearing that, that's the bread man. Uh, let me let him go. So in Sri Lanka, oh yeah, I'm in Sri Lanka, by the way. I live in Sri Lanka. So that is the bread man. In our lockdown, there's no shops open. So the vendors come to us and they go around and sell the things that we need. So there's no going to shops or open shops. We just have to deal. No one is looking forward to the lifting to the end of lockdown the way that I am, right? But so far so good. I have no complaints. I'm really grateful. Sri Lanka is warm. It's beautiful. I have a hammock. I'm around gorgeous people, a garden, everything. So, and now that we've cleared that up, let's talk about collective trauma. So, a collective trauma is an event that we all experience but have a hard time processing because it is so intense or it's something that we've never experienced before that most of us on either as a community, as country, or even as, oh, here he comes again. Or today as a global community, right? As an entire planet cannot process, right? And so what happens is that we all have the same kind of experience if you think of apartheid or slavery or all that. And most not don't know how to process such traumas because it's so deep and we go like, okay, life has to go on, and most of us do that even now with the pandemic, is to say, you know what, it's great, life has to go on. But what happened with apartheid, right? What happened with slavery? What happened with the Holocaust is what scientists have found, what researchers have found, is that there's such a thing as epigenetics inheritance, which is that trauma that we experience is passed down from generation to generation. So even collective trauma is stored in the body, and then we pass it down from one generation to the next, and it affects how we show up in the world. So, for example, they did a study of in the Jewish community in New York where they looked at Jewish kids in school whose ancestors or whose grandparents or great grandparents had been in the Holocaust, and Jewish children whose great grandparents had never experienced the Holocaust. They'd never had exposure to the Holocaust. And what they found was that these kids, even though they had the same upbringing, parents had similar levels of money, etc., had very different behavioral responses. The kids whose ancestors, or should I say grandparents or great grandparents, had experienced the Holocaust, even though they'd grown up in the same community with the same kind of financial resources, gone to the same schools, the same vacation spots, had similar family dynamics. Right now, the kids processed events differently. They showed up differently. They were more shy. They were more safety concerned. You know, they'd be like in high school and they'd be concerned about safety. They were more aware that they were not living in a world that was fully safe. They had more issues with anxiety, more issues with depression, a lot of things. And there was no explaining as to why until they started doing a lot of the work around their ancestral history, right? And they could see how that actually even impacted their parents, everything. So it's not that we are immune to whatever happens on a global scale. We interact with everything and it affects us. And if we do not process the things that are happening now, our kids and their kids will be impacted, right? And honestly, a lot of people, I think, in those days just didn't know, like, the Holocaust happened. How do you process such a massive event? Okay, slavery, there's freedom. How do you process that? We still don't know how to process apartheid and colonization in South Africa, right? Not to mention that we also have a history of slavery. So, how do you process such deep events, right? So, what most of us do is to go, okay, it will be better, and we try to make it better for the very next generation. But what we're not aware of is that has already altered us in some way. It's altered the way that we view the world. And the minute that we view the world differently, the minute our view of the world alters, the way that we show up for ourselves, for anything, for our families, alters as well. It is completely changed, right? So we are no longer the same people. So what is happening with this pandemic is the very same thing. And it's not right or wrong, right? Is we process events in the way that we've been taught to process them and in the way that we know how. Okay, so when something as big as this pandemic happens, most of us will be like, oh, we've processed the trauma, but we actually haven't, because the trauma is layered. We are still going to see the impact of this pandemic in another year, in another 3 years, in another 10 years. It will keep showing up differently. You know, on Twitter, people were laughing and saying that how it will show up for our generation is that our grandchildren will ask, why is grandma so obsessed with cleaning everything? Why is she so obsessed with sanitizers and putting on a mask? And then we'd have to tell the grandchildren that, oh, I lived through the pandemic. We laugh now, but it's really true. If you think about, I was talking to Mangala here. She's my Sri Lankan mom, right? And she was saying that her grandmother would always tell them that they ate 2 potatoes during the World War, right? And how that influenced her grandmother's relationship with food. So trauma plays out in so many different ways, right? So for most of us, this trauma isn't just happening in a silo that, oh, we're just locked down at home. It's also affecting the way that we work. For some of us, it's a whole new ball game of how are we doing work. And for some people, it's literally making them aware that I cannot go back to work. This is who I am now, right? Like I cannot imagine going back and working with other people. For some people, it's literally making them aware that, oh my God, I never ever want to work from home. I will always work with other people. So those for the people that are going through the how of wanting to be around other people, their response may be, I will never ever create an environment where I have to work away from other human beings. And that may be a trauma response, and it will impact the financial decisions they make around employment decisions, around which will impact their finances, right? So just being aware of how environment and collective trauma shapes all of us, right? And also just how this pandemic is also shaping the way that we are relating to each other. Most of us are are online, right? And we're building relationships online. Some people are offline. Some people don't have anyone around them. So there's so many layers. And so my thing is not to say that there's a right or wrong way to respond to this, because I don't know the right way. And I don't think any psychologist knows the right way, but to be aware when you are being triggered and and your view is changing, and your view is not changing from a space of this is what I really want, but is being triggered, is being altered from a space of deep fear. So for some people, it may be, oh my God, I lost a job now, right? That this has triggered something within you. Because as events happen, the way that trauma works as well, like I said, it's already layered. So as one event happens, another event triggers us, right? So for most of us, you'll also see that a lot of people are struggling with abandonment issues and saying, well, people are not checking in on me. They're not there. A lot of that, and people say that's ego. I say, no, it's not ego. This is trauma. It's not narcissism. It's that for most people, this is triggering their issues around abandonment, right? Now, there's a trauma triggers our trauma responses. These are the responses that we had that kept us alive in past lives, kept our ancestors alive, or kept us alive in these lifetimes. And the behaviors are not always the greatest, right? The mind only cares about the behavior that keeps you alive. So for most of us, we may find ourselves behaving in ways that we thought that we had already transcended or we had already changed, and suddenly it may feel like, oh my god, the world has abandoned me, because now this is triggering your abandonment response, because maybe being told not to leave the house triggers an abandonment response, or triggers a rebellion response, or triggers some response within us. And it's so important to know when you are being triggered, right? Because you can imagine most of us are going to get out of this with no relationships, because if you are being triggered and you're like, oh my god, I am so triggered, nobody has checked in on me. And because if it's your inner child that is triggered, you are responding in the way that your inner child responded, around not being checked on, around not being called, around not being included in things. So children don't think in terms of mom has to work, my friends also have families. They just think the world is me, right? And they should. That is perfect. That's what children are supposed to do. But what happens when we are traumatized is that we can sometimes be hijacked by our inner child or our inner teen. And then we behave from that space, which looks immature. And so we make really wild decisions in that moment. We can decide, oh, people will never hear from me. That's it for my friends. I don't have any friends. So can you see how that can also ruin relationships? And beyond ruining relationships is that a huge part of growing and expanding financially is having a network and a support network. So if you have no tribe as you are in the space of needing to recuperate financially, there will be so many repercussions, right? And also, not only is that happening, there's also what is being reaffirmed with the abandonment triggers is this belief that people are not trustworthy. People don't care about me. I'm not that important to other people. People don't love me. So can you imagine if you decided to start a business and you have been triggered and been spending this lockdown reaffirming those beliefs because people are not calling you? How are you going to start a business and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to show up as my full self. People want to hear from me. People love my product and services. People want to buy from me, if that is your core trigger, right? Remember what I said about trauma attracting the things that traumatize us. Then we'll probably attract people into our business and into our finance space that keep triggering us in that way and keep affirming that belief, right? So that's just one example. Another thing that I really wanted to talk about before I start answering questions is this idea of how trauma can really get us to this, the collective trauma and what's happening in terms of the financial markets and everything is, I know I told the Money Magic students from the jump when everybody was telling them to, oh my God, invest, invest, invest. There's blood on the street, the stock market. Now is the time to invest. The stocks will go up. And I went into the student group and I said to them, please do not listen to that, right? This is an unprecedented situation. We don't know what is going to happen. We don't know which companies are going to come out of this okay. We don't know which companies are going to come out of this not okay. If you're going to make investment decisions from a space of understanding the market, right? And I also shared this in my larger Wealthy Money group, right? So if you guys want to check out that group, just search Wealthy Money and join. But what I shared there was the importance of understanding the investing landscape, understanding what it is that you're investing in, understanding that you're investing in managers. So do your research in managers, understand the industry that you're investing in, understand the company, how the company is positioned within the industry, understand their employment policies, just understand very deeply what it is that you're investing in. But a lot of what people were being forced to do was to panic buy, panic invest, right? And this is a huge thing. So be aware that a collective trauma like this, because it's also having an impact on the financial markets, is also triggering our deepest of financial traumas. So for most people, it is triggering the belief that there is not enough, that this is the only opportunity that they will ever have. So what it's doing is it's causing most of us to act from a space of fear financially. Most people are being told to start businesses right now, as soon as possible, diversify your income. But are you starting your business from a space of calm, or are you doing everything that you're doing in your business from a space of fear? Because if you are being fear driven and working from a space of being triggered, fearful, and traumatized, eventually you will burn out because you're working against so much of yourself. You're fighting so much of yourself to take action, right? So just being aware when you are taking financial actions and we're being triggered to make financial decisions that you would normally not make, or that maybe you can give yourself that time, because collective trauma has a huge financial impact on us. But not only that, it impacts our reaction around money. So if I already have a deep belief that I don't have enough money, when I see the markets tanking and people telling me that, oh my God, I'm going to make so much money, the stocks are going to bounce back in another year, in another 18 months, in another 2 years, buy. And I've done no research, right? I haven't told people, and people haven't told me what to buy and why to buy it, why they're recommending those companies. And I just go and I buy. It's from a space of panic, and I'm most likely to buy bad, I'm likely to make very bad financial decisions, right? We've all seen how when we act from a space of desperation financially, it impacts us. So understanding that we are in a trauma environment, and this trauma that's happening in terms of financially, in the financial space, is also triggering our own deeper underlying trauma. So the way that we can um, I guess, react or control. I don't want to say control, but basically the way, yeah, temper. The way that we can temper and balance our reactions is by working on our own financial traumas and our own financial triggers. So when that we are being given this advice and we're being told and everybody's freaking out, oh my God, we're not going to have any, like everything's falling apart, I'm going to lose everything, there's nothing here. We can be at peace and see the truth of that and be present with the truth that right now I have a roof over my head. I haven't lost that, right? And if I do have a roof, if I do lose the roof over my head, is there a parent that could take me in? Will I truly lose the roof over my head? Is this true? But when we are very scared, it's hard for us to think logically and to see the forest from the trees, right? So just being absolutely aware of how collective trauma triggers our own traumas, and how we can work with the trauma that is happening collectively if we can start to work on our own triggers and our own traumas. Because yes, there is blood on the streets in terms of everything happening and in terms of the markets and everything. And yes, business owners, myself included, are having to make very difficult financial decisions where we're having to let go of certain revenue streams. But at the same time, what I am constantly seeing with clients, with students, with myself, is that as we do the work around trauma, as we do the work around our triggers, is that there are new opportunities that come up, open up, because the world is still the world. We still have our gifts. There is still a need for our gifts. And even if those opportunities are something as simple as planting onions, planting food, that is such a need that the world is going to have in a few months, right? So just being aware of that. Okay, so any questions, guys? Whew. Okay, I'm gonna have to wear my glasses to answer these, to read up on these. Whew. I was like, what am I gonna talk about for a full allocated hour? Look at me. When I started, I was like to my guides, you guys can speak through me. I don't have anything to say. I literally didn't even know what the heck I was really going to say. I just got the topic for today about a few days ago. And then I was like, I guess it will come together. And I feel like, wow, okay, we went pretty deep on trauma and collective trauma and family trauma. Um, and so, Namasanta, you say, "Your Jehovah, I can't even fathom how I'd be in that situation 10 days of not talking to anyone." Yeah, actually, it's not the talking it's the not talking is not the issue, right? The issue becomes yourself. It is you. The issue with the 10 days was I really didn't want to talk to people. And I can talk, okay? I can talk. So I didn't really want to talk to people. And I'm always like that when I'm at Vipassana. I don't want to talk to people because I want to be with myself because myself is my biggest issue. Because, and remember, like, it's a meditation thing. So sometimes you go into past lives. Like I've been to Vipassana 10-day sittings where nothing about this lifetime comes up. All that's coming up is my past lives. And like I had one 10-day sit. I think, did I do it in Washington State? Yeah, I did it in Washington State in the US. And I was the entire 10 days, I was dealing with the past life where I used to be a Buddhist monk in Japan. And I've never really been the person that's like, of all the countries that I want to travel, Japan is always on my last list. Like, I have no desire, even now, right? I think even worse after that 10 days of sitting, I was like, just dealing with a full 10 days. Every time I closed my eyes and meditated, I would see myself as that monk. And yeah, that monk had a lot of issues. And what I realized, what I came out with after those 10 days is even though I'd been a monk and I'd practiced Buddhism, practicing the thing doesn't mean I was applying it. I had no freaking idea what it actually meant to be Buddhist in that lifetime. I didn't understand it because I was just in such a deep state of emotional suffering. And it helped me see how, like, in this lifetime, I could replay that, right? And that the important thing is to do the work, not from an intellectual standpoint, but to really do the work on a physical, emotional standpoint, or from a physical and emotional point of view, to experience the teachings. And I think for me, that's when I came out and became super serious. I got out of that sitting and then I started packing and leaving for South Africa. I was like, that's it. I need to go to South Africa and I need to work on my family trauma and figure out how I apply these principles and heal myself on that level so that I start healing my family trauma and I don't replay this intellectualizing of healing. Because I realized that from that lifetime, it didn't go too well for me. Like it was, yeah, that was such a weird 10 days. Um, sorry, let's see. Joy, you say it's about everything but money, wealthy money 101. Yes, Joy. So Joy is a money magic student and one of my former one-on-one clients. Totally. Portia, you say, I would love to experience Vipassana. It's really, really great. So Letlotlo, you say, it is my mom too. Yeah, the mother wound is deep. Malebo, you say, yo, the guilt of leaving others behind. I do that with boyfriends and friends. Yeah, and it's not even about them. Like, guilt is one of the most layered emotions because guilt shows that we are breaking a vow. So guilt stops us from breaking a vow that we have made in the spiritual slash akashic plane, right? So it could be that, but guilt can be so many other things, right? So I just love exploring guilt as an emotion. It's one of my favorite emotions to explore and look at. Okay, so guys, I think this is it for me with today's class. Thank you so much for joining. If you want to know more about the work that I do, you can go to wealthy-money.com, and on the homepage you'll see all the various things that we do in Wealthy Money. And if you're interested in doing work around your bank account and stopping triggers around your bank account, and you felt like this really resonated with you and you want to go deeper, I am running the Fall in Love with Your Bank Account live again, starting from Saturday, April 25th until Wednesday, April 29th, where I'll be doing live breathwork meditations. Remember, I believe that healing is a physical thing that happens in the body. It's not just like a mind thing, but it's a full like physical, emotional, everything. So the meditations that I work with take you into the body. So I'm going to be doing those as live guided meditations for the bank account course. It's 5 days, but trust me, in 5 days, a lot can happen, a lot of incredible shifts. I've had people do this bank account challenge. Last time I had 1,300 people signed up, and they did it without even the meditations, and people still experienced incredible shifts. And for me, the shifts is about creating lasting shifts, not just like a shift that happens for a year, but having tools that you can use for a lifetime, and that the shift, you can see it for a lifetime. You know, you're like, oh, I used to be this person. Now I literally do this after just the 5 days. So this is just focused on changing your spending habits and helping you make difficult financial decisions in this time without making your decisions from a space of like deep fear or shame or guilt, no matter what the decisions are, right? So sometimes the decisions are, like I said, letting go of a revenue stream. And, you know, usually that would cause me so much pain and struggle and trauma and panic. But here I am smiling and stuff, and I'm still alive, right? So that is the power of working with our money trauma and healing our emotional reactions around money, so that we're making decisions from a space that aligns with us. And feel free to post your questions in the video. I am in this group, so I will keep answering things. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a fantastic day. It's almost evening my time, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you so much for joining me. Cheers.